Hey everyone, thanks for checking in our latest TDR Trade Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. Well, we saw the news last week regarding the executive order from Governor Greg Abbott. More or less, edibles and beverages were the side of the business that is not going to get affected. So with that, we're kind of entering this new chapter of the industry when it comes to beverages and edibles and what kind of potential it has nationwide. Well, this company that we're going to bring in here today is launching a nationwide opportunity. So what does this all mean? Well, let's find out as we welcome in AV here on a Thursday. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
Yeah, what's going on? Not too much.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I mean, there's a lot going and a lot moving and shaking with hemp right now. And I mean, edibles.com have the infrastructure to start to deliver products nationwide. It's good to see this kind of vision and rollout amidst some uncertainty in the space. But it's going to be nice for Thomas to be able to set the record straight and really give an about face as to how he's thinking strategically with the products going forward nationwide.
Yeah, I found it interesting last week with that executive order out of Texas where edibles and beverages weren't really affected. And why was that? But we'll learn more about that. So with that, let's welcome in Thomas Winstanley from edibles.com back to the podcast. Been a few months, but happy on the eve Q4. Where does time go, right?
I don't know, but I appreciate being back, and it's great to chat with you all.
Yeah. How's the summer been? What do you think of like everything that's going on in this industry right now? And some of the news that came out last week regarding Texas, as I said off the top, beverages and edibles seem to be not really affected by all this. I think that's telling us to how some of these lawmakers are viewing this side of the business. But I think what we'll do then is segue into this new announcement you have about this national expansion. But it's telling, and where maybe this is a sign of things to come for this side of the space.
We certainly hope so. I mean, I think the executive order coming out of Texas was very interesting to see. Yeah. I think everybody was kind of a nail biter watching two special sessions come up and not seeing somewhat in action around the hemp side. But in fairness, they were also dealing with some other major, Texas legislative issues, which took precedent. All things being considered, it's been a really busy summer, even with, even the last month. We were in DC twice for fly-ins with the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. A lot of conversations, and even the difference between the conversations we had in July, fast forward to the ones we've had, the day that everybody came back from recess. Tonality is changing, and it's very reflective. I think Texas is a reflection of the way the market is starting to shift, and there's a lot more discussion, and I'll say from House members and senators that we met with, we've seen a growing interest from them across staffers, council, and I think that's a very telling sign for future policy and the way the market is starting to evolve, both from a consumer standpoint, but more importantly from a policy standpoint. And so we've been busy in that area.
When you say tonality is changing, I mean, when you're engaging in these conversations, like how educated are they on the task at hand? Like, do they understand the subject matter thoroughly to the point where they can differentiate intoxicating hemp products, synthetics, THCA flower, et cetera, and run the gamut? And if so, do you ever see us getting to the finish line where there's a national framework in place around intoxicating hemp products versus the state-by-state fragmentation that we're seeing in, let's say, Texas and Florida currently?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. The first thing I would say is comparatively from a visit in July to one in September, the measure of the conversation changed from this is not something that we're super well aware on, educate us, to now saying, well, this is something we've started to have some discussions about. How are you looking at it?
Yeah.
And a lot of that was echoed across many different states, many different leaders, and it's hard to say where a lot of this discussion goes. I know we have some great champions, Comer and Paul are, really evangelizing the ability for us to continue this type of commerce. And our hope is that there will be some form of framework. I think 2026 is going to be a critical year. It's either going to be a punt or it's going to be some determination. We also expanded our reach with our trade partners. We were meeting with members of, from HHS to AG to FDA. And so I think there's the fact that we're having these conversations and it's not just hemp anymore. Members of WSWA were with us. There was a pretty large coalition that were in DC recently. And I think the fact that we're seeing so much attention being brought with collaborative cross-functional groups coming in from different industries talking about it, even farmers. So my hope is that we start to see some material progress to fortify the category, to create some form of framework. One of the things that was very interesting that we heard back from a lot of folks we spoke with was it's not often that we have a category come forward asking for regulation.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of responsibility, and also giving face to some of the actors like our company who are trying to do it right and trying to create a very responsible network of government.
Well, you must feel good about the future. I want to bring this up. You announced Edible Brands, a nationwide expansion of your e-commerce marketplace for hemp-derived THC products. So you've gone from a Texas pilot to now servicing over 65% of the U.S. with direct shipping and same-day delivery in key markets. So when I bring that up, you must think that in due time, whatever the wording is going to be to make an announcement like this and to expand, that good things could be on the horizon for the industry. Am I fair to say that?
It is fair. And I think there's never going to be an absolvement of risk, right? Risk is always going to be something that we calculate as a variable. But at the same time, too, while there is some turmoil on the policy front, we also think it's incumbent upon ourselves as a company like ours, which is somewhat rarefied in the hemp world today, to come forward and say, we still believe in this. We think there's a way forward, and we think there's a right way for this to be done. So we've spent the last few months after a very strong launch in Texas, recognizing that what we were putting out is the right message with the right partners, with the right groups, that we can go further with what we had intended in the beginning. And we've even fast forward some of those timelines, despite, the inclement weather on the policy front.
With the current product mix on your website, I mean, I think the last time we spoke, I was pretty adamant about you're very thorough in the brands that are on your website. You're very thorough in the products that are offered on your website. It's obvious that you stick to beverages and edibles. With the maturation of the hemp industry nationwide, do you see the hemp industry living in that medium of beverages and edibles, and let's say flower and inhalables gets relegated to the traditional cannabis market?
Yeah, this is complicated, right?
Yeah.
From my perspective, when I look at health and wellness-based products and what has really strong efficacy for qualitative improvement of life, I think ingestibles.
Yeah.
I think there's an inherent disconnect when we put anything other than air in our lungs. I'm not saying that those things shouldn't be available to folks, but I think for our purposes, what we really are focused on is how do we become a gateway for folks to try these products? How do we help give them permission? I think everybody knows these products exist, but they really don't know the entry point based on the points of distribution that are available to them.
Right.
And they're also lacking that reassurance trust where, again, nobody's necessarily going to go to a liquor store for a healthy sleep aid, nor will they go to a gas station. So how do we start to bridge the gap?
Right.
On the portfolio front, I'm really excited that we have brands like Kiva coming on board. Products, Wyld, which has been, probably one of the largest selling brands in the country. That's very calculated on our end, where we want to introduce people coming into the category to the best things that we personally feel are available to them.
Yeah.
And that's where on this one, we've said, okay, well, let's expand a little bit further. We've also added Breeze into our offering on the beverage front. And so we're trying to take very measured steps to build out a portfolio, again, without becoming, this massive, collection of products where it's almost overwhelming, which I've always felt has been a challenge in the dispensary world.
Very much so.
And so we want to try to bifurcate a little bit of that, the negotiating of a consumer coming in, trying these products and having the outcome they're looking for. You really need great products. And so, what's nice about it is we now have 3 of the largest brands currently in the chew space. I think they have around a 20% market share.
Yep.
3 of them, which is by far and away some of the largest market share in the country. So with all of these kind of progressions, we want to continue to add more and more, but we want to do it slow, thoughtfully, and making sure that we have the right balance. And that's really a big part of what we want to accomplish here, is provide people with great products, with great outcomes, with a consistent level of service where we take all the guesswork out. It's not like you're standing in front of, shelves and shelves of products.
Yeah.
It's very, very straightforward and to the point of what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think curation is key. And it's actually funny because I gave my mother-in-law one of the 1906 sleep. Sleep, I guess they're more so the compressed,
drops,
the tablets or the drops. And she was asking me, where can I get those? And I'm like, well, they're actually not licensed with any dispensaries in Florida. So I go to your website today doing interview prep, and I'm like, Star, here you go. You'll be able to get these in Florida very soon. So, I mean, it's a great outlet. And I mean, I do agree with you. Curation is key, especially for novice consumers. It's very easy to just get deer in headlights walking into a dispensary, and then you're at the mercy of the bud tender who, I mean, let's be real. I mean, they're not always the most well-informed person product-wise.
Come on, they only got 500 or 600 SKUs to understand, right?
They've also got sales reps going in there that are talking to them about certain product, moving certain product. And I mean, if you go to enough dispensaries, you'll see trends. With bud tenders favoring product. Well, look, especially.
People trust brands, to Anthony's point, and that's key. We've talked about, what is it, Anthony, this teacup program where people have to drive sometimes, 300 miles to get whatever they need. So when I said off the top, talk about, because we say edibles, beverages are not affected potentially in the state of Texas. This is same day delivery. So, these are two different things, but as far as health and wellness, you talk about veterans, you talk about same day delivery. How does that work? And what is, I guess, the opportunity? Because that's going to answer a lot of questions, especially if you're talking about originally, if this teacup program, they're expanding only to 15 different locations, but in some cases people have to drive 200-300 miles.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is this last mile concept where, essentially we use our edible arrangements franchisees who are licensing our brand to be 3PL fulfillment centers. With edible brands, national reach through edible arrangements, we have 600 plus retail locations across the country with last mile services. So that allows us to bridge a convenience gap that otherwise can be challenging in some parts of the country. And for everywhere we can't service that last mile order, we have the shipping program. And so what we want to do is basically, for the consumer's best interest, if you're in a delivery range, we'll get it to you the fastest way, which is, same day delivery.
Yep.
But if not within that range, you can do second day, next day, so on and so forth. So we've really tried to figure out how do we capture the largest net of market share with these products, with this level of service, and really see how it expands. And, I think the Texas market has been very, very interesting.
Yeah.
We chose quite a first market. We've all sat on the edge of our seats watching the policy play out. And we've worked very, very closely with partners across the board. We know that people want access. So how can we provide access in a way that meets their needs? And that's really what we're trying to determine. And that has boded very well for us. And that last mile program is now expanding into Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. And I think we've also seen on our end, the franchisees are incredibly enthusiastic about joining this program. These are independent business owners. They own the franchise. These are all small businesses who are now participating in a supply chain that otherwise would have been very difficult for them to get into. Yeah. And again, this gets back to one of my bigger, exciting points about this program. I think hemp genuinely is succeeding in a way cannabis wasn't, because we are allowing this to reach so many more individual business owners in a way that cannabis is exceedingly restrictive to. So it's kind of a win-win when you look at it from that angle, where you have this network that is able to participate in the supply chain with a company like ours.
Going back to the lawmaker conversations and to the point you just made, where hemp is much less restrictive than let's say traditional cannabis, do they understand that it's essentially the same thing, hemp and cannabis? One is much more free to act and transact, especially with, let's say, interstate commerce, credit card networks, same day delivery. And cannabis, that's literally that same Delta-9 THC molecule, just happens to be in a completely different ecosystem, and defined in the eyes of the feds is literally the same thing.
It's funny. So with lawmakers, I think they are starting to understand this.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that all of them are there. And I think it also is very geo-specific too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think in the Southeast, I spent a lot of time with, Southeast politicians and their cabinets and staffers, and there's an acknowledgement and understanding. There's a beginning to get the understanding.
Mhm.
And what we really try to help them understand as well as part of this is when we look at our portfolio per se, the term intoxicating is a great example. Put this into words that they can understand. I wouldn't, one of the conversations we've had is that, anything can be considered intoxicating.
Mhm.
It's about responsible consumption. Is one beer intoxicating? I would argue for most people, probably not. Is one of these beverages or one of these chews intoxicating? I would argue not. Is a multiple use that is, maybe irresponsible? Does that become intoxicating? Sure.
Yeah.
But really trying to drive this comparison to, the most analogous category, which is alcohol. They're starting to understand that this is maybe this is something they need to pay attention to. It's something they need to be smart about, but it's also maybe not the doom and gloom that they saw of, oh, this is cannabis. So, let's like force feed regulations or prohibitions through. And I think the other side, which is very interesting, is several of the conversations, staffers and, chief counsel of these folks, they started to understand the other side of prohibition being the danger here, right? Yeah. Where they know that prohibition would actually have an adverse impact on their state, which is worse than where we were in the first place. And so I think there's a very pragmatic discussion happening, and there's a very logical understanding of the category, where even if they may not theoretically love THC, they respect the fact that it exists. And that to me is maybe one of the biggest existential realizations that is starting to come forward.
Yeah.
And even looking at the House versus the Senate, see Republicans on one side who are advocates, and then on the House you see more Democrats. And so you are getting two sides of the coin starting to bring attention to this with a clear understanding of what is different about these products than things you will find in a dispensary.
And with that notion of that THC is not the boogeyman, it's really not dangerous. You're not going to have society just descend into madness if we were to legalize cannabis. With the Trump administration talking about potentially rescheduling from 1 to 3, do you think that the loosening of THC on the cannabis side in the eyes of the feds catalyzes regulation around hemp and starts to fast track things? Or do you think that they're not really binary?
Personally, I don't feel that they're necessarily binary. I think it's a really good signal, though, around how we're viewing this molecule to see, a reclassifying of cannabis. I mean, I think that's something that would be incredibly smart. I also think there's political motivations behind doing so, where we see that there's now this massive influx of people into a category that want it protected. I don't know that there's if it's reclassified tomorrow, what does that do to the hemp industry? I think if anything, we're cheering on the other side, the cannabis industry, because that would be a good thing. And I also think it starts to unlock the opportunities for people to invest in this space. And, I think for me, getting American consumers more comfortable with these products, so they don't have to feel like they're, carrying the baggage of the last 50 years on prohibition, I think that's a really good thing. So it will be really interesting. And I think there's an appetite at the federal level to figure this out. And that was something in some of the branches of the government that we heard from was, we're talking about this and we're trying to understand this and we're trying to think this through. And I think a lot of the restriction is less about the category and the molecule and maybe about working cross-functionally between these parts of the executive branch that have to be in tandem and on the same page. So I think there's an appetite. I think there's a willingness, but I think it's going to take a lot to get there. But as I said, we wouldn't be launching a national shipping program if we thought we're at the end. I think we're actually at the beginning.
It will take a lot, but I'm a firm believer we're on to the next chapter of this whole scenario. There's so many moving parts. It's the stuff that happened in Texas. It's Amendment 3 that happened last fall that got a lot of people's attention. It's the questions being asked from Trump about rescheduling and him making a comments as to we'll have a decision soon. RFK, Pam Bondi in Chicago last week, cracking down on illicit vapes. This is all part of an ecosystem. And you talk about the Farm Bill with Senator McConnell and Senator Rand, that's going to be at the forefront. So there's no sense speculating on what the language is going to be, because I think there's some incremental steps that have to take place. So to Anthony's point, rescheduling is definitely in that first step, but all roads lead to the same end goal, I think, for both of these industries, because they're attached at the hip. This is why I think rescheduling opens up the door, and a lot of lawmakers will start to view this in a different way, which, at the end of the day, if you're Republicans, you control the Senate. Let's steal this issue from the Democrats, because the overwhelming approval for reform is insurmountable in the U.S. right now. But
yeah, look, one only needs to look at, Trump sending his pollsters down to Texas to polls on the Republican side to see what the Republican divide is. And I think it was 7-point differential between pro and con prohibition. Like, that to me is, I don't know, since the Reagan era, I don't know that we've ever seen the pendulum swinging more towards, this is maybe not so bad. And I think one thing that is an interesting variable is when we look at the supply chain. I mean, we are talking about the backbone of America's farmers who are in the hemp program. We're not talking about indoor cultivation. We're not talking about the indoor gardens of the cannabis industry. I mean, this is a fully ingrained American-made product category. And I think for those reasons, farmers, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which we're members of, we launched a farmers coalition, and they came with us to Capitol Hill. We sat in front of James Comer, and we gave a bunch of testimony from all aspects of the category. And again, I think this is a way that, maybe hemp is a little different from cannabis, where we have a much more universal access supply chain that cannabis doesn't necessarily have.
Well, we got a proof of concept, which is alcohol from 100 years ago. I don't want to say this is an easy fix, but there's definitely a proof of concept that shows what are some of the changes that could be made for both industries. And let's face it, this has not been a topic of conversation other than passing the Farm Bill in 2018. But because this loophole has just expanded so much, you now look at it here 7 years later and realize, this has to change, and this cannot, continue to go down this road. And this has gotten so off track over the past 7 years as to why this is passed to begin with. But I do think in a lot of ways there's some real good proof of concepts that we could implement and learn from big alcohol as to what we could do as far as regulation for both industries. And I think that's kind of the road we're leading down, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're going to continue to see this kind of, this coming together of a lot of these industries that are now advocating, where maybe a year ago it was just hemp showing up to the table. But now when you have hemp, you have farmers, you have, wine and spirits showing up, you have distributors. I mean, you're starting to see this real gravity. And that gravity is also bubbling up from state discussions too. Obviously Texas, major. I mean, this was, we're not out of the woods yet. There's still some things to be figured out. There's a policy review. It's going to have to go to a comment period. But I think generally what they have done was fairly sharp. And I think it was very emblematic and a great test case for what we will probably see more of in the next 6 to 12 months, and especially with a farm bill. The farm bill is going to be interesting. I think that's, Mitch McConnell, we're all very well aware, wants to change the perception of his influence on this by repealing it. But I also think there's going to be, in the negotiations of that, with an omnibus bill coming for government shutdown, there could be some sneaky ways for Mitch McConnell to make more stands around this. But I also would say, again, we have both Republican and Democratic support fractioned between the two parts of Congress. I think there's going to be a slow trickle in where all of a sudden this is no longer a bipartisan issue. This is a universal issue, and that's what consumers want. And for them to repeal something they put into law and created for us to have this opportunity, I think we're very far along. I think there's always a chance that they could try to put it back in the bag. But I think if push came to shove, it would be a very disingenuous thing to tear this apart. And then it would set us back in ways that the war on drugs couldn't have even believed possible.
Agreed. Nothing makes more sense than Senator Mitch McConnell making decisions about the future of America, right?
Yeah, right. Amen.
Yeah. Anthony, I got to bring up, like, same-day delivery in the state of Florida. That would almost seem foreign 3 or 4 years ago, would it not?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, do you think this in some ways, I guess, normalizes hemp-derived THC in some way? Know that you're getting that kind of same delivery? Question for either one of you.
It's already normalized. I mean, you can go on Uber Eats right now and order beverages. I can have them in my door in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
If I wanted to. Hemp-derived THC is normal. I mean, the fact that I've said it several times. I mean, my wife, my mother-in-law, my mom, they'll go into Total Wine and buy products. They would never go into a dispensary beforehand. And there is millions of them across the nation that are buying those products. THC is normalized. That's already happened.
What's that say about dispensaries in the future? You still going to have your hardcore flower consumed? Like,
look at liquor stores. I mean, liquor stores exist. Dispensaries are going to become liquor stores. You go there to buy certain products. You also have certain products that are at grocery, that are at C-store, and that are at Walgreens. But I think dispensaries are never going to go anywhere. They might get really sized down and footprint-wise, but just look at liquor stores. There's one on every corner.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, and we're still also, in the scale of time in American history, dispensaries are still fairly new by comparison.
Of course.
Liquor stores. And again, I'm ex-cannabis. I paid my dues in the cannabis industry for 6 or 7 years. And the way I generally see it is there is going to be a bifurcation. It's going to come down to molecule and dosing, right?
Yep.
It's going to be certain types of products should be available in more traditional points of distribution. But I think there's always going to be a case for people wanting flower, vaporizers, high strength, RSOs. I mean, there's no question that industry and that category, we want it to succeed. We want that to be preserved. How that continues to evolve for us is, look, we think ingestibles, low dose ingestible products that have mind altering, qualities and have effects based outcomes. We think those are going to go the way of general OTC, where you can go into any store, get these products. But if you are looking for something that is a little stronger, heavier, in a different form factor, well, that's what dispensaries are for. And I think that's going to be where you see this real coming together of regulatory in the next 10 to 15 years. And I'm not saying it's this. I think that's a longer.
It's the normalcy is my original question is because, yes, people that are well versed in this space right now, I get it. They are going to sit here and say that there is some normalcy to it. But for those that aren't, you're right. It's only going to expand in different verticals, such as dispensaries. And then you have total wines, things like that, all based on who the consumer is, what the demographic is.
It's normalized because also people were scared. Like, you rip a bong or you smoke a joint, you don't know how high you're going to get.
Yeah.
Edibles and beverages, 5 milligrams is 5 milligrams. You know exactly what's going to happen. You're not going to get in a distressed state. Like, they're safe and they're trusted. The fact that that's what hemp is leading with is why it's going to win, especially in terms of normalization and in terms of just mass retail.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing I think is also going to be more kind of turning of the tide in terms of both cannabis and hemp is I think we're going to see a lot of, a continuation of big publicly traded cannabis companies launching hemp-derived products to compete in those channels too. Yeah. So it's not like, I think from my perspective, it's always somewhat ironic to hear, oh, well, cannabis is against hemp. I think maybe that is overblown a little bit, because if you look at the big MSOs, they're all coming into hemp.
They're all in it.
Everything's all in. Yeah, and so it's just, again, it's kind of this, we're trying to understand this landscape of, we know that these things are going to continue to bleed together. We know points of distribution are working in certain areas. Let's keep emphasizing that. And again, I think there's more than enough cake for everybody to have a slice, MSOs to the person who's R&Ding products, wanting to launch the next brand. And I think we need to keep seeing that. We need to seeing that free market evolve. And I think there's a part where if you're a cannabis operator and you stick your nose up at hemp, well, you're missing dollars, you're missing sales, you're missing the opportunity, which is what probably got you there in the first place. Yep. And so I do think we're going to start to see a regulatory framework.
A lot of change in the horizon. People predicting, or some bombastic.
And there's a reason why the MSOs have jumped into the categories that they have.
Correct.
With Curaleaf, GTI, TrueLeaf, they're all in the edibles and drink space. It's the THC flower, the synthetics, and the inhalables that they're, I don't want to speak for them, but against that create a public safety problem for some. I mean, that's what needs to get regulated. The edibles and drinks are benign. I mean, it's like going and picking up a 6-pack of beer at this point, in terms of normalcy, and they're all in the beverage category, all of them, for the most part now are, and they're deploying more dollars. They're not deploying less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good thing is we're moving in that direction. What that entails, we don't know yet, but the conversations are being had. But 65% you're now servicing across the country. It's a big footmark, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, and that's really where, I mean, that's been the game plan for us
Yeah.
is, but when we were having initial discussions about this, I was very clear as a non-negotiable where this is not something where you just go and you launch it as big as possible and see what happens, because that's how you court problems.
Yeah.
And so I give a lot of credit to our CEO, Soumya Fareed. She's been very understanding of kind of how do we really want to bring this into the fold of our company? How do we do it in a way where we're not alienating core constituents on the edible arrangement side? How do we navigate this in a tight regulatory framework and do it in a way that we are being, living up to our name of being compliant, being responsible, and being legal? Mm-hmm. And so, for us, being able to finally unlock this much larger marketplace is what we've actually started from when I began, a year and a half ago. That was always the goal. But we wanted to grow sustainably, and we wanted to do it within a framework that is constantly changing. And we spent a ton of time working through compliance. That's something that my number one, counterpart here is our chief legal officer, Doug Knox, who's, he came to Benzinga, he comes to the conferences, he comes to lobby, because we need to have that level of security, especially when we say we're going to go to, 65% of the US and bring these products in.
Yeah.
And we can only hope that our hope is that this is the first time where you can get Kiva, Wyld, Wana, 1906 in a single package delivered to your door. We hope that has meaning for folks. And over time, we hope
I'm
that.
sure it does. Times have changed, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
In this content creation world we live in, we like long-form content, but we also need some YouTube shorts. So here's your question regarding a YouTube short. If you had to give investors and policymakers one takeaway about the future of hemp-derived THC in the U.S., what would it be?
Put the language into the context that a politician's going to respond well to.
Okay.
So we talk a lot about the loophole. It's an unintended consequence. It's not a loophole. It was written into law. The word intoxicating, I honestly struggle with, because I don't believe a single serving size of anywhere from 2 to 5 milligrams would be considered intoxicating. I think we need to put this into frame. We have to frame the conversation better as a category and as policymakers and lobbyists. The more and more we delve into the doom and gloom language of scare tactics, the more we're gonna will that into existence. I think we need to frame the conversation better. I think we need to be smarter about how we present these things. And I think we have to continue to beat the drum of the entire supply chain, not just the end consumers, but we should look back to the farmers who are making more money on these products.
Yeah.
Let's contextualize this conversation in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah. Make America healthy again.
Your words, not mine, but generally I subscribe to that sentiment for sure.
Thomas Winstanley, Senior Vice President, edibles.com, correct?
Executive, but
Okay.
yes, same deal.
Anyways, I was close, but maybe I just gave you a promotion right then and there. But listen, always good catching up with you, and congrats, obviously, and onwards and upwards as far as the growth. But 65% servicing the U.S. right now for your e-commerce platform, edibles.com. But that's great, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks,
right,
guys.
Thanks, Thomas. So, what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Trade Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.